I've been studying the different types of gamers for a very long time, and I even started a company dedicated to advocating for the majority of Call of Duty players. So I feel very qualified to offer an educated opinion on this topic. In this video, I'm going to define the 3 different types of Call of Duty players, so you can get a better understanding of the type of player that you are. The first type of player is hardcore. Hardcore players are the smallest but most visible group, and they take the game far more seriously than everybody else. They also play it a lot more than everybody else. Many hardcore players spend at least 20 and some as much as 40 or more hours per week playing the game. But it's not just about the amount of playtime with hardcore players. When these people play, they're actively trying to improve and get better at the game with every single game they play, every fight they get into. Many of them are ultra competitive, so they really hate losing and they really love winning. And it makes them feel good about themselves, putting so much time into the game when they can claim publicly that they're better than other people. This is why hardcore players typically hate if a game doesn't track their KD and number of wins. Hardcore players also usually want a bigger skill gap because they have the time, the ability, and the desire to practice and master the skill gap and use it to their advantage. Hardcore players put a much higher priority on the game than everybody else. So if they're on social media at all, they're highly likely to be involved in the Call of Duty community online. And maybe they're even very vocal about changes they want in the game. Hardcore players consume the most content on Twitch and YouTube by far. As a matter of fact, most streamers and content creators are likely to be hardcore players. If any of this sounds like you, you're probably a hardcore player. Next up is casual players. Casual players are by far the largest group, but to everybody other than the game developers, they're largely invisible. They don't really take the game that seriously and really don't play all that much either compared to hardcore players. Most likely 2 to 8 hours per week on average. Some casual players might actively try to improve, but it's not a high enough priority for them to spend their precious gaming time practicing game mechanics like slide canceling. Casual players might be a little competitive among their friend group, just the people they play with mostly. They might know how many wins they have, but they're generally not paying a whole lot of attention to other stats, and they probably couldn't tell you off the top of their head what their KD is. Casual players really aren't immersed enough in the game or the community to pay any attention to the skill gap, and to be honest, many of them probably don't even know what a skill gap is at all. But in general, casual players are a lot happier with a smaller skill gap because it's easier for them to play, which means they'll have more fun. Their main focus is having fun, and if there's a big skill gap, they're going to get fewer kills and wins. Casual players are the foundation of the Call of Duty community, but even though their numbers absolutely dwarf the number of hardcore players, they are almost invisible and silent compared to hardcore players because they don't spend a lot of time in the Call of Duty community on Twitter or watching streams on Twitch or videos on YouTube. So casual players are highly unlikely to be streamers or content creators. If this sounds like you, chances are you're probably a casual player. Finally, we have midcore players. Midcore players are a growing and very important part of the gaming community, mostly born from the meteoric rise of the Gen X and Millennial gamer dad. Midcore players combine aspects of hardcore players and casual players. For example, midcore players generally play less than hardcore players do, because they have other responsibilities that take priority. But when they do get to play, many of them are actively trying to improve. They're usually more competitive than casual players, and many of them could tell you their KD and number of wins. But they still probably have the most fun playing with their friends, and they really don't care if that affects their KD. No alt accounts here. Some of them even manage to make a little time to practice and try to master the skill gap like a hardcore player. But at the end of the day, most of them are just plain held back by their lack of time. Midcore players generally prefer a smaller skill gap, but they won't quit just because a game has a bit larger skill gap like a lot of casuals would. Midcore players may or may not be involved in the Call of Duty community online like on Twitter, but they do watch some Twitch streams and YouTube videos. So if this basically sounds to you like midcore players are basically hardcore players without enough time to actually be hardcore players, it's because that's basically what they are. Many midcore players would actually be hardcore players if they didn't have other responsibilities that take priority. If this describes you, you're probably a midcore player. Watch this video next to see how the Call of Duty Players Union helped make Warzone 2.0 better than Warzone Caldera for casual and midcore players.